Yeah, and it's difficult because even with a family these days, if you've got a couple of kids and you've got a couple of parents, both parents are working. They can't necessarily afford a cleaner. So
Mm,
when do they fit it all in? Mum's,
mm,
yeah. So
mm. Well, another thing I've learned is a lot of people don't know how to clean and whatnot.
absolutely.
Mm.
Yeah.
It's the same with cooking. Like that has been a learning curve for me over the last 20 years.
Yep.
I don't know. I just didn't realize that people didn't learn those things because,
Yeah.
well, we were in just small country communities,
Mm.
and if you didn't learn from your mum and dad, you kind of learnt from I don't know, the youth group leader or the sports
Yeah.
coach or your friend's
Yeah.
family. You know what I mean? There was always someone teaching you things in those
Yeah.
smaller communities back then.
Oh,
And
yeah. I couldn't turn a stove on at 16 when I moved out, but I was
mm,
lucky because the era was they started bringing out Canton jars and with
mm,
the instructions on. So I was able to work it out for myself in a basic way.
mm, yeah,
So, but cleaning, no, I knew how to clean. And I knew what was expected in cleaning
mm,
because mother was a
mm,
50s housewife. But a lot
mm.
of people never have the opportunity to learn.
No, I know. And that was a bit of I just hadn't realized how, I mean, I was aware that some people didn't have the opportunity to learn those things, but I
Mm.
hadn't realized how widespread it was.
Yeah. Mm.
And even when I went through uni and they were talking about, just basic things with kids of not knowing how to do basic cooking, not knowing basic financial literacy, and we didn't talk about cleaning as much. It was more obviously the food and the finances at uni. But even then, even though like you look at these statistics, it was still hard to imagine that people didn't learn these basic
Yeah.
skills until you get out there and you realize, holy dolly,
Yeah. Well, think
they
about the
really
change.
don't learn these things.
Yeah. Think about the changes to childcare. When I had my
Mm,
daughter in childcare, she was in family care. And so that woman would do her washing and the dishes and the cooking and
mm,
the blah. And my child would observe that. So
mm,
that's normal,
mm,
household care. They're not allowed
mm,
to do that. They changed
mm.
the rules some years ago. They're not allowed to do housework when they've got other people's children. These kids are not,
Really? At family daycare?
that's right.
That's, wow, that's pretty sad.
That's, yeah, they've got to offer educational opportunities. Well, housework is an educational opportunity
Yeah.
in my mind because it's looking after you. Cleaning's about your health.
Yes.
We've just come through COVID.
Yes.
Cleaners are the most important people on earth,
Yes.
seriously. And so,
Yes.
but we've got generations of kids that won't have a clue. And
Mm,
you've only got to look at the Reddit type stuff or even on YouTube and see somebody, yeah, some of these kids that get sent off to American colleges and they don't have a clue what to do or, yeah,
mm. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And yeah, that has been a bit of a eye opener for me
Mm,
being in a larger populated area and then of course teaching. You
mm,
just see a whole different range of people than
mm.
I'd seen when I lived in the country, a
Yes.
small country town.
Mm,
And so, yeah, that's been interesting to realise that actually for this house and the standard of cleaning, it was okay. Do you know what I
yes.
mean? But it
Yes.
does mean that there was a whole lot more work when you're moving in
Yes.
because you've got to clean
Mm,
first.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Mm,
And I think too, coming from rural or smaller communities, frequently there's multi generations and larger families. Like you probably live close to your grandparents and see them. You probably live close to aunts and uncles. So a lot of your socialization is home based. You'll go off to someone's place. There isn't cafes, a lot of cafes. There isn't McDonald's or all those takeaways, which everyone uses in the city now to socialize,
mm.
or
Yeah, it's
hotels
true.
even. But yeah, it's sort of family based. So
Yeah, it's true.
probably where yeah, rural living is the smallest population, so 10% of Australia. That's
Yeah,
so yeah.
yeah.
So I do worry for the younger people, the distress of not being able to get it done at some point when they recognize they can't do it. Yeah,
Mm,
how do they cater for that? Yeah,
mm, mm.
I guess that's probably where we will come in at some point.
A few years ago now, but she was saying there was a YouTube, or it might not have been YouTube, a social media presence, and it was a guy who was a bit older, but it was like um, the questions only a dad could answer, sort of
Oh,
a thing. I can't remember the name, what his social media name was, but what he was he realised there was all these, particularly boys, out there that didn't have dads. And
yes.
so it's like the things my dad would have taught me. And
Mm,
she just said, oh, he had so many followers and he was just teaching him really basic things
yeah,
that boys would have learned if they had a dad at home.
yeah,
Or, like you say, have that family based
yeah,
social network.
yeah,
And yeah, and it just took off. Like
yes,
she
yeah,
just said, that just took off like crazy. And I think, well, when you look at YouTube and places like that, there are a lot of, grannies and whatnot there
yeah,
teaching some of these skills that they normally would have taught their grandkids, I guess,
yeah.
or whatnot in a different environment. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. And something I watched recently is I can't remember who said it, but it was there's only two mammals that go through menopause, and it
Oh,
was
okay.
some
I
form.
wasn't expecting you to say
No,
that.
me either. It's just like okay, so why? And who's the other one? And it's a
Yeah.
whale or something. And like nature, usually once you no longer able to reproduce, then you just die. So that's like that. So he said, so they looked into nature and compared it and went, you know why? Because we need the older women to teach, and the whales needed the older women to teach the pathways of getting around the world. And so there's a teaching component that comes into play essentially in our older life.
Mm,
And it's like,
mm,
oh, wow. So this is,
mm.
yeah. So when it comes to teaching kids or anything else, yeah, that's where we
Well, some
come in.
of my biggest life lessons came from my nana.
Yeah.
Some of the things that I remember was my nana. Yeah,
Yes. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So it makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Because when you're interacting with the younger generation, especially if it's grandkids, but any of them, you haven't got those same pressures that you've got as a young family trying to raise them, have you? You're
No.
not you're not stressed about trying to get to work, trying to feed the kids a healthy lifestyle, and all of the decisions, because kids will be naughty. It's like, how do I deal with this? Have I been a rotten parent? Am I making the right decisions? All of those things. As a grandparent, it's just like, well, come and have a nice time. So you're relaxed and you've
Yeah.
actually got that opportunity to interact on
Yeah.
a much less, I don't know, a much more peaceful level, isn't it? And so they will learn from you because you're not
Yeah.
judging them, you're not yelling at them.
Yeah. Mm. And
Yeah.
the other thing with that is that when you're in that stress state, but you're actually just learning a lot of those skills. Whereas when you get
Yes.
to my age, it's like, oh, I remember that, it's just there and it's yeah, you've already done the learning. You just oh, well, why don't you try this or why don't you do
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
yeah, and it's silly stuff like found out that if you use dish liquid to clean the grime off your top of your cupboards instead of spray and wipe from cooking stuff, dish liquid works because it breaks the oils down. So, and then it comes back into education, doesn't it? If they've done a little bit of chemistry or something, they might join the dots, but if they haven't, then you can still teach them.
Mm,
Yeah.
mm,
So,
mm,
and it's,
mm,
yeah. I know when I
mm.
returned to school, I actually went back to high school here in our little town. So at that stage, we had a population of about 600. And I actually attended some classes there. And it was funny, if you're just friendly with the kids, they'll eventually warm to you. And initially, I sort of had some kid dash out and go, "How old are you?" And I just went, 55. Like, you know, it's like, oh wow. And because I was friendly and didn't get
Mm,
affected by that stuff, yeah, I've developed friendships that have lasted. So,
mm,
because we do have a cultural thing where young people don't like old and that kind of concept.
mm,
We need to break that down because how we can't share our knowledge unless those walls are broken down a bit.
mm. Yeah, absolutely.
Mm.
Absolutely. Yeah.